The lobby of the Grand Meridian Hotel always had a certain rhythm to it. The sound of suitcase wheels rolling across polished floors, the soft chatter of travelers, the faint hum of the air conditioner, it all blended into a background melody that guests rarely noticed. But on this particular afternoon, something felt different. Maybe it was the warm sunlight pouring through the tall glass windows. Maybe it was the subtle smell of fresh flowers placed in tall vases near the reception desk. Or maybe it was simply the way people moved, slower and gentler than usual, as if the day itself had exhaled dot in the middle of this calm atmosphere. A man named Daniel pushed his cleaning cart across the lobby floor. He had been working at the hotel for a little over a year, and most days looked the same: wipe the tables, clean the floors, empty the trash, repeat. He didn't mind the work. It was honest and steady, and in a city where everything felt expensive, having a stable job meant he could breathe. Still, there were moments when he wished life had gone in a different direction. Daniel had once dreamed of music. Not fame, not fancy stages, just music. He had spent years playing the piano, practicing late into the night, writing small pieces that only he ever heard. But life doesn't always bend toward dreams, and when bills piled up and responsibilities grew heavier, music slowly slipped out of his hands. He didn't quit because he wanted to. He quit because he had to. Sometimes, though, when the lobby was quiet and no one was paying attention, he hummed a tune to himself. Nothing loud, nothing noticeable, just something to help the hours pass more smoothly. Today, without thinking, he hummed while wiping fingerprints off the marble counter near the main entrance. His voice blended gently with the lobby's natural rhythm. What Daniel didn't know was that someone unexpected had walked into the hotel at that exact moment. A man in an expensive suit and polished shoes, the kind that seemed to glow under the lights. He carried himself with a calm confidence, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. People who recognized him whispered among themselves. Some stepped out of his way. Others watched him with a mix of curiosity and awe. He was known simply as Mr. Harrington, a millionaire, a businessman, a man whose decisions could change companies overnight. He had a reputation polite but distant, generous but private. Few people knew much about his personal life, and he preferred it that way. He wasn't one for small talk, and he rarely paid attention to the small details around him. But today, as he walked through the lobby, he heard something that made him slow his steps. A gentle hum, a melody so calm and warm that it didn't seem to fit the surroundings. He looked around, expecting maybe a musician or a speaker playing soft music. Instead, he spotted Daniel, the hotel employee focused on his work. For a moment, Mr. Harrington just watched. It wasn't the humming itself that caught his attention. It was the feeling behind it. There was something sincere about the way Daniel hummed, something that didn't feel like routine or habit. It felt like a small piece of a life the world didn't see. Mr. Harrington stepped closer, his shoes clicking lightly against the marble floor. "You have a rhythm," he said suddenly, surprising even himself. Daniel froze. He looked up, startled by the voice. When he realized who was standing in front of him, his heart skipped. Everyone at the hotel knew Mr. Harrington, not personally, but by reputation. People didn't usually talk to him unless spoken to. "Oh, sorry, sir," Daniel said quickly. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone." "You didn't disturb me," Mr. Harrington replied. His eyes drifted toward the grand piano on the other side of the lobby. It stood tall and elegant, polished to perfection, though rarely used. "Do you play?" Daniel blinked. "Play what?" "The piano." A strange silence filled the space between them. Daniel felt heat rise in his face. He didn't know how to answer. Part of him wanted to say yes, loudly and proudly. Another part wanted to shrug it off and pretend he had no idea what the man was talking about. "I used to," he said softly after a moment. "A long time ago." "That's unfortunate," Mr. Harrington said, his voice calm, almost thoughtful. "Music tends to stay with a person, even when life moves on." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. He shifted his weight awkwardly, unsure whether he was supposed to continue working or stand still and listen. Behind them, two receptionists watched with wide eyes. A couple waiting for their room keys leaned closer. Conversations in the lobby quieted, not because people wanted to be rude, but because the millionaire almost never spoke to employees casually. This moment felt unusual, even historic in a small way. Mr. Harrington glanced back at the piano. Then, with a half-smile that startled even the staff, he said, "Play that piano, and I'll go out with you for lunch." It was such a strange sentence that Daniel thought he misheard. "Sir? You heard me," the millionaire replied. His tone wasn't harsh or demanding. It sounded more like an honest challenge, spoken out of curiosity rather than arrogance. The lobby seemed to freeze. A guest who had been typing on a laptop stopped mid-sentence. A child holding a balloon stared openly. Even the bellboy, who always moved with quick steps, halted near the elevator. Daniel laughed nervously. "I don't think I could do that. I haven't played in years." "All the more reason to try," Mr. Harrington said. The challenge hung in the air. Not forceful, not intimidating, just unexpected. And because it came from Mr. Harrington, someone whose words carried weight, everyone waited to see what Daniel would do. His hands felt suddenly heavy. He looked at his cleaning cart, then at the piano. He felt like two versions of himself were standing side by side. One was the hotel employee who needed to finish his shift. The other was the young man who once believed he could make music that mattered. He hadn't touched a piano in so long. What if he made a fool of himself? What if his fingers didn't remember the notes? What if he embarrassed himself in front of a man with the power to change people's lives? Worse, what if he disappointed himself? But something in the millionaire's expression wasn't mocking. It wasn't a joke. If anything, he looked genuinely curious. So Daniel took a slow breath. "If I play," he said carefully, "and it doesn't sound good, I hope you won't hold it against me." Mr. Harrington shook his head lightly. "I don't expect perfection. Just honesty." Daniel swallowed hard. He felt the weight of several stairs as he stepped away from his cart. Each step toward the piano felt unreal, as if he were walking into a different life. He could hear a few whispers from nearby guests. Is he really going to play? What's happening? Did the millionaire just ask him out for lunch? Daniel ignored them. His heart beat loudly in his ears. When he reached the piano, he ran his fingertips lightly across the smooth surface. Memories came rushing back: late nights practicing, mornings spent learning new melodies, afternoons when he played just to feel calm. He pulled out the bench and sat down slowly. The keys looked the same as they always had, white and black in a perfect pattern. His hands hovered above them, trembling slightly. In the distance, he saw Mr. Harrington watching with the same calm expression. No pressure, no impatience, just expectation. Daniel took another breath, trying to steady himself. He wasn't sure what he would play. Maybe an old piece he used to love. Maybe something simple. Maybe nothing at all if his fingers refused to move. The lobby waited. Then, very softly, Daniel placed his fingers on the keys. He hadn't started playing yet, but the moment carried a quiet electricity. People leaned closer. Time seemed to stretch. Inside Daniel's chest, something old and familiar stirred, something he thought he had lost. Whether he played beautifully or terribly didn't matter right now. What mattered was that he was here, sitting before the instrument he once loved, with a chance, however strange, to reclaim a part of himself. He closed his eyes. His fingers pressed the first note, and the entire lobby held its breath. Daniel's fingers hovered over the piano keys, and for a moment he felt frozen, as if the entire world had paused to see what he would do. It had been years since he touched a piano. His hands were used to holding cleaning rags, pushing carts, and sweeping floors, not creating music. Still, something inside him refused to pull back. Something small but stubborn whispered, "Just try." The first note he played was soft, almost too soft to hear, but it echoed through him like a memory waking up after a long sleep. Then came a second note, then a third. The sounds were uneven at first, as if his fingers were unsure whether they remembered the path. But slowly, the old familiarity returned. His hands began to move in a gentle pattern, shaky but honest. The lobby stayed silent. The guests, the staff, even the children, who normally ran in circles around the lobby, all of them stood still and listened. It wasn't that Daniel was suddenly playing something grand or perfect. It was the feeling in the notes, the quiet effort to rediscover something he had once loved. He continued playing, letting the melody guide him rather than thinking too much about each key. It wasn't a complicated tune. It was something he had made up years ago when he used to practice in a small rented room at the edge of the city. That little tune was his comfort back then, a way to feel calm when his world felt too heavy. Now, here he was, bringing that forgotten melody back to life in front of strangers, in front of a millionaire who had somehow seen something in him. He didn't know how long he played. It could have been a minute or 5. Time felt different while his fingers moved. The more he played, the more the stiffness in his hands faded. The notes flowed with more confidence, and his breathing eased. For the first time in a long while, he felt like himself again. When he reached the last note, it hung in the air for a brief and beautiful moment. Then slowly, the sound faded into silence. Daniel lowered his hands and rested them on his lap. He didn't look up at first. He was afraid of what he might see: confusion, disappointment, or worse, pity. His heart thumped loudly, almost painfully. Then he heard it. Clapping. It started with just 1 or 2 people, then spread across the lobby until the whole room filled with warm applause. Some guests smiled. A few nodded at him in encouragement. A child clapped harder than anyone else, eyes shining with excitement. Daniel finally lifted his head. His face felt warm, his throat tight. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. He wasn't used to being seen at all. And then he saw Mr. Harrington. The millionaire stood a short distance away, his arms lightly crossed, watching with a calm expression. Not cold, not distant, something softer, something like respect. When the applause died down, Mr. Harrington stepped forward. "You played from the heart," he said quietly. Daniel swallowed, unsure how to respond. I don't know if it was any good." "It was honest," Mr. Harrington replied. "And that's good enough." A few staff members exchanged excited glances. Daniel could hear whispers behind him. "I didn't know he could play like that. Why didn't he ever say anything?" "Do you think the millionaire is impressed?" Daniel felt overwhelmed, not in a painful way, but in the way someone feels when the world suddenly shifts under their feet. Mr. Harrington stepped closer to the piano. "When was the last time you played?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "Years ago, before I started working different jobs. Life got a little busy. Music didn't fit anymore." "That happens," the millionaire said. "But you haven't lost your touch." A strange, almost amused smile appeared on his face. "Lunch?" he asked. Daniel blinked. "Are you serious?" "I told you if you played, I'd go out with you for lunch," Mr. Harrington said. "I keep my word." The employees standing nearby nearly gasped. Some tried to hide their smiles. Others looked at Daniel as if he had just won a secret prize. Daniel wasn't sure what to think. Part of him wanted to accept, because how often did a normal hotel employee get invited to lunch by a millionaire. But another part of him felt nervous. Why would someone like Mr. Harrington want to spend time with him? They came from different worlds. Daniel cleaned floors. Mr. Harrington owned buildings. Still, he couldn't deny the curiosity shining in the millionaire's eyes. "I guess lunch would be okay," Daniel said softly. "Good," Mr. Harrington said. "Finish what you need to do, and we'll go." Then he walked toward the seating area, giving Daniel a moment to breathe. The moment he stepped away, a group of hotel staff hurried over to Daniel. "Are you nervous?" One whispered. "What did he say?" Another asked, "Are you really going to lunch with him?" Daniel felt embarrassed by all the attention. "It's just lunch," he said quietly, though even he knew it wasn't just lunch. He stood up from the piano and wiped his palms on his uniform. His hands were still shaking a little, not from fear, but from everything that had just happened. It felt surreal, like he had stepped into a story that didn't belong to him. He pushed his cart slowly back toward the corner of the lobby. His tasks were still waiting: tables to wipe, glass doors to clean, trash bins to empty. The familiar routine calmed him. It reminded him where he came from and what reality looked like. But the piano performance lingered in his mind. The notes still echoed inside him, reminding him of who he used to be. As he worked, guests passing by smiled at him. That was lovely. One woman said, "You should play more often," an older man added. Daniel nodded politely, grateful but shy. Compliments were rare in his life, and he didn't always know how to hold them. By the time he finished the lobby area, Mr. Harrington stood up from his seat and walked over. "Ready?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, sir." "No need for sir," the millionaire said. "Just call me Harrington." Daniel tried the name silently in his mind. It felt strange, but not unfriendly. They walked toward the hotel entrance together. The doors slid open smoothly, and the warm afternoon air greeted them. Outside, cars passed by, people walked along the sidewalks, and the city buzzed with its usual energy. A luxurious black car waited by the curb. The driver stepped out and opened the back door respectfully. Daniel hesitated. "I'm not sure I should get in a car like that," he said nervously. "Nonsense," Harrington replied. "It's just a ride." With a deep breath, Daniel stepped inside. The seat felt softer than anything he had ever sat on. The interior smelled like leather and something faintly sweet. Harrington joined him, and the car began to move. For a while, neither of them spoke. Daniel looked out the window, watching buildings pass by. He felt as if he were dreaming. Like any moment, someone would tap his shoulder and tell him to wake up and return to the lobby. Finally, Harrington broke the silence. "You played with emotion," he said. "Most people play to show skill. You play to say something." Daniel turned slightly. "I wasn't trying to show anything. I just remembered how it felt. Sometimes that's enough." The car continued through the city streets. "You could have been a musician," Harrington added. Daniel smiled sadly. "Maybe, but life doesn't always give us the choices we want." "That's true," Harrington agreed. "But sometimes life waits to see if you'll try again." Daniel didn't know what that meant, but he felt the weight of the words. When they arrived at a small restaurant tucked between two tall buildings, the driver opened the door. It wasn't a fancy place, which surprised Daniel. It looked warm and welcoming, with wooden tables and plants by the windows. "I come here often," Harrington said. "Good food. Quiet atmosphere." They walked inside, and a waiter greeted them with a polite smile. He seemed to recognize Harrington, but treated Daniel with equal respect, which eased his nerves. They took a seat near the window. Daniel looked around, trying to settle into the moment. He still felt out of place, like he didn't belong in such company. But Harrington didn't treat him like someone beneath him. His tone remained calm, steady, and surprisingly genuine. "So," Harrington said, leaning back slightly, "tell me your story. How did someone who plays with that much feeling end up working at a hotel?" Daniel looked down at his hands. His fingers were still slightly tense from playing earlier. "That's a long story," he said quietly. "I have time." Harrington replied. Daniel took a slow breath. He didn't know where this conversation would lead, but he sensed something changing, something he couldn't name yet. Maybe today wasn't just an unusual day. Maybe it was the beginning of something he never expected. The restaurant was warm inside, filled with the soft aroma of cooked vegetables, bread, and quiet music playing overhead. Daniel sat across from Harrington, still trying to understand how his day had taken such a surprising turn. Just a few hours earlier, he had been wiping down tables. Now he was sitting at lunch with a man whose name carried power wherever he went. The waiter brought them glasses of water and menus, but Harrington didn't open his. He simply placed it aside and looked at Daniel with a patient expression. "You were going to tell me your story," he said calmly. Daniel felt a wave of nervousness. No one ever asked for his story. Most people barely noticed him. He was the person who swept floors, picked up fallen papers, and cleaned fingerprints off glass doors. But something in Harrington's voice made it clear that he wasn't asking out of politeness or curiosity. He genuinely wanted to know. Daniel took a breath. "I grew up loving music," he began softly. "My mother worked long hours, but she saved little by little until she could buy a second-hand keyboard for me. It didn't sound perfect, but it was enough. I played every day after school. And when I was older, when I got a bit better, I saved for a real piano." Harrington listened intently, not interrupting. "I joined small competitions. Nothing big, just local ones. Sometimes I won, sometimes I didn't. But I loved the feeling of playing like the world went quiet for a few minutes." He paused, taking a sip of water. "Then life got complicated," he continued. "My mother got sick for a while. We fell behind on bills. I started working different jobs to help out. Music took a step back, then another. Eventually, I didn't have time at all." "And you let it go," Harrington said gently. Daniel nodded. "I had to. Survival comes first." The waiter returned to take their order. Harrington chose a simple dish, grilled vegetables and rice, then nodded for Daniel to pick whatever he felt comfortable with. Daniel chose something modest, not wanting to appear demanding. When the waiter left, the conversation resumed. "Do you miss it?" Harrington asked. Daniel let out a soft breath. "Every day. But I convinced myself it was better not to think about it too much." Harrington leaned back slightly, studying him. "What you played today wasn't the work of someone who has forgotten. It came from somewhere deep. You don't lose that." Daniel didn't know how to respond. Compliments made him uneasy. He didn't trust them easily, not because he doubted people's kindness, but because he was afraid of believing in something only to have it taken away again. "You surprised me," Harrington continued. "People with money, influence, education, I meet them all the time. But I don't often meet someone who plays from the heart." Daniel looked down at his hands. "I didn't think anyone was listening." "Great things often start that way," Harrington said. The food arrived soon after, and they ate quietly for a moment. The flavors were warm and comforting. Daniel felt his nerves relax slightly. The restaurant's peaceful atmosphere helped. No one stared at them. No one whispered. It allowed Daniel to breathe normally again. After a few minutes, Harrington spoke again. "Do you ever think of going back to music?" Daniel hesitated. "Sometimes, but I don't know how. I don't have the time or the money, and I don't know if I'm still good enough." "That's not what I saw today," Harrington replied. Daniel felt a soft pressure in his chest hope, mixed with fear. But he added quickly. I'm not asking for anything. I don't expect anything. Today already feels unreal. I'm grateful for the lunch and the kindness. Harrington smiled faintly. You think this is about kindness? Daniel blinked, unsure what that meant. It's about possibility, Harrington said. Sometimes people cross paths for reasons we don't understand. Sometimes it means nothing. Sometimes it means everything. I don't believe your story is finished. Daniel wasn't sure how to respond. He wasn't even sure he understood. Their meals disappeared slowly between the conversation and quiet pauses. Daniel relaxed enough to share small pieces of his life, how he moved from job to job, how he struggled but kept pushing forward, how he sometimes found comfort in humming tunes while he worked. Harrington shared a few things too. He spoke about his early career, the mistakes he made, the people he trusted who didn't always deserve it. He wasn't born into wealth. He built it piece by piece. He understood hardship. He understood sacrifice. That surprised Daniel the most. From afar, people like Harrington looked untouchable, like life was always smooth for them. But listening to him now, Daniel realized that even the powerful had their own struggles, just different ones dot at one point. Harrington asked, Do you still have a piano at home? Daniel shook his head. I sold it a long time ago. It hurt, but we needed the money at the time. Harrington nodded, as if that fact didn't surprise him. You deserve to play again, he said calmly. Daniel felt his heart skip. I don't think I'm ready. No one ever is, Harrington replied. But readiness isn't the point. Wanting is? Daniel didn't know what to say. Wanting, he had. But what good was wanting without a way to reach it? As they finished eating, Harrington leaned his arms on the table. I don't do random acts, he said. But I do believe in potential. And I don't believe in ignoring it when it shows up in front of me. Daniel felt confused. What do you mean? Harrington didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out the window for a long, thoughtful moment. Finally, he turned back to Daniel. How would you feel, he said slowly, if someone gave you the chance to return to music? Daniel froze. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He barely breathed. What do you mean? He whispered. I mean an opportunity, Harrington said. Proper training. A place to practice. Access to people who can help you grow. A chance to see what you're capable of. Daniel shook his head quickly. No, I can't accept something like that. I'm just a hotel worker. That's not all you are, Harrington said firmly. You're someone with talent. Real talent. And you deserve more than sweeping lobbies. The words hit Daniel hard. They were kind, but they scared him. I don't want charity, Daniel said softly. This isn't charity, Harrington replied. It's investment. In me? Daniel asked in disbelief. Yes, Harrington said simply. Daniel felt a strange warmth rise in his chest. Hope. Terrifying hope. But he also felt fear of failing, fear of being disappointed, fear of stepping into something too big for him. You don't have to decide anything today, Harrington continued. Think about it. Take your time. Daniel nodded slowly, though his mind felt scrambled. After a few moments of silence, Harrington stood. Let's head back. The ride back to the hotel was quiet. Daniel stared out the window again, but this time his mind wasn't calm. It was full of swirling thoughts, memories of playing piano, of applause, of dreams he thought were dead. When the car stopped in front of the hotel, Daniel stepped out with shaky legs. Harrington paused before leaving. You have something special, he said. Don't push it away. Then the door closed, and the car drove off. Daniel stood there for a long moment. The hotel entrance towered above him, just as it always had. Inside, his cleaning cart waited. His tasks waited. His normal life waited, but something inside him had shifted. When he walked back inside, Several staff members rushed to him, asking how the lunch went. Daniel answered politely, but vaguely. He wasn't sure how to explain something he barely understood himself. He returned to his duties, but every movement felt different, as if he were floating instead of walking. The rest of his shift passed quietly. When he finally reached home that evening, his small apartment, with walls that echoed more than they spoke, he sat on the edge of his bed and stared at his hands. Hands that had cleaned floors, hands that had once played melodies, hands that had, just hours ago, reminded a millionaire of emotion. He replayed Harrington's words in his mind. You deserve to play again. It's not charity. It's an investment. You have something special. Daniel didn't sleep much that night. His thoughts moved restlessly, weaving between fear and excitement. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain. His life wasn't the same anymore. Something had begun. Something he couldn't ignore. And deep inside, where dreams once lived, music stirred again, waiting for its moment to return. The night felt heavy with questions after the unexpected moment at the music lounge. The employee walked home slowly, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. The millionaire's strange request, the challenge, his reaction to the piano performance, the way he rushed out without another word, none of it followed any normal pattern. It felt like the start of something bigger, something still hidden behind a closed door. The employee lived in a small but tidy apartment a few blocks from the lounge. It wasn't much, but it was peaceful, and on nights like this, he needed peace more than anything. He placed his keys on the small wooden table near the entrance and sat on the couch. His fingers still tingled as if the piano keys were underneath them. He stared at his hands for a moment, remembering the expression on the millionaire's face, that look of shock mixed with something softer, like a memory. The reaction seemed too personal to be about skill alone. He leaned back and tried to calm his thoughts, but the more he replayed the scene, the stranger it became. Why would a millionaire walk into a lounge, sit at the bar like any regular customer, and then test someone by saying a sentence so unusual? Why would he say that playing the piano could make him go out with them? The whole thing seemed like a joke, but the man's serious tone said otherwise. And the atmosphere around him, the quiet confidence, the expensive watch, the sharp but tired eyes, it all suggested this man wasn't someone who wasted words. The next morning came faster than expected. The alarm rang, and the employee opened his eyes with a heavy sigh. His body still felt tired, but he pushed himself out of bed. The world outside the window was cloudy, as if even the weather carried some confusion. He dressed in simple clothes, grabbed a small breakfast, and left the apartment, still unsure what the day would bring. When he reached the lounge, the manager greeted him with an unusually curious look. "You okay?" Last night seemed intense. The employee forced a small smile and nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just a strange night." The manager didn't push further, but his eyes clearly wanted more details. The employee kept things vague, not sure how much he should share. Telling the full story sounded unbelievable, even to him. Hours passed with normal tasks, cleaning tables, arranging bottles, checking supplies, but his mind wandered constantly. Every time the door opened, he looked up with a small spark of hope or dread. Maybe the millionaire would return. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe the whole thing was just a one-time moment that would never make sense. Late in the afternoon, the manager stepped into the employee's path with a puzzled expression. "Someone's asking for you," he said. "And he's waiting outside, not inside." Like he's avoiding being seen. The employee's heart skipped. "What does he look like?" The manager shrugged. "Tall, dark jacket, expensive shoes. Looks like he belongs in a different world from the rest of us." That was enough information. The employee wiped his palms on his apron and slowly walked toward the entrance. Outside, The millionaire leaned against a black car, hands in his pockets, gaze distant. He looked completely different from the night before, not in appearance, but in energy. He seemed troubled, restless, like he had been fighting with himself before deciding to show up. When he noticed the employee, he straightened, though he didn't smile. "We need to talk," he said softly. Those words carried a weight that pushed the employee's curiosity even further. "I? Okay. About last night?" The man nodded, but didn't look directly at him at first. "I shouldn't have rushed out the way I did. It wasn't fair to you." The employee shook his head. "It's fine. I just didn't understand what happened." The millionaire finally met his eyes. There was something raw in them, something almost afraid. "When you played that piano," the man said, "you played a melody I haven't heard in years." His voice dropped as if the memory itself weighed on his chest. "I didn't expect anyone to know it. It was something very personal. Something from a part of my life I avoid visiting." The employee frowned slightly. "I didn't know it was special to you. I just played what I felt." The man nodded. That's what made it hit so hard. He took a slow breath. "Look, the thing I said about going out with you wasn't supposed to be serious. It was just a challenge. A careless one. But then you played, and everything changed. I walked out because I needed a moment to think. I didn't expect the past to hit me like that." The employee listened quietly, letting the man speak without interruption. It was clear the millionaire wasn't someone who usually explained himself. His voice carried an unusual vulnerability. "Last night," he continued, "you reminded me of someone I cared about. Someone who played that same melody many years ago. When you hit those notes, it was like I was standing in two different times at once." He paused. "It shocked me. It overwhelmed me. And I didn't handle it well." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full of unspoken thoughts. Finally, the employee asked gently, "So, why did you come back today?" The millionaire's gaze softened. "Because leaving without a proper explanation didn't sit right with me. And because—" He hesitated. "Because I think last night wasn't an accident." The employee's chest tightened with curiosity. "What do you mean?" The man tilted his head slightly. "Let me show you something. If you're willing to trust me for a moment." His tone was sincere, not demanding. The employee hesitated. Not because he felt unsafe, but because the situation was moving in a direction he hadn't expected. A millionaire asking him to step away from work, to see something important. It sounded like the beginning of something unpredictable. But something in the man's voice felt honest, human. "Okay," the employee said quietly. "I'll trust you." The millionaire nodded once, relieved. He opened the car door. "Get in. I promise this isn't anything dangerous or strange. Just something I need you to see." The employee looked back at the lounge. The manager stood at the window, watching with wide eyes. The employee gave him a small signal, a nod to show everything was fine, and then got into the car. The moment the door closed, the engine hummed softly. The millionaire got behind the wheel and started driving. The city slowly blurred past them. The employees sat quietly, trying to guess where they were going. The millionaire didn't speak at first. He seemed deep in thought, as if organizing his words. After a few minutes, he finally spoke. "I grew up in a house not far from here," he said. "It wasn't always the life I live now. Things were simpler. My father was a musician, not a famous one, but someone who loved music more than anything. He used to play that melody every night. It was his way of ending the day. And when he passed, I couldn't listen to it anymore. It felt too heavy." He kept his eyes on the road, but his voice carried years of emotion. "I thought I had buried that part of my life. moved on. But last night, you played it exactly the way he did. Every note, every pause. It felt like he was sitting next to me again. It shook me more than I'd like to admit. The employee's eyes softened. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring back something painful. The millionaire shook his head. You didn't bring pain. You brought memory. And maybe memory is something I should face again. They drove a little longer until the city began to fade into quieter streets. Trees lined the road. Houses looked older, full of history. Eventually, the millionaire stopped the car in front of a small, charming home with a wooden fence. It didn't look like the kind of place a millionaire would live. It looked like a place someone cherished, long before success found them. He turned off the engine and rested his hands on the steering wheel. This was my father's house. I've kept it, but I rarely visit. Today felt different. He stepped out, and the employee followed. The air around the house felt calm, quiet, almost too still. When the millionaire opened the door, a faint smell of old wood greeted them. Inside, everything was neatly arranged, untouched for years. On the far side of the living room stood an old piano. The millionaire walked toward it slowly, like approaching a fragile memory. I haven't opened this since the day he left, he whispered. He gently lifted the piano cover. Dust floated in the air. The keys were aged, but still beautiful. He took a deep breath and stepped aside. Play it again, he said softly. The same melody. I want to hear it here in the place where it was born. The employee swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment. He sat on the bench, placed his fingers on the keys, and closed his eyes. The room held its breath. Then he began to play. Each note filled the house with warmth, sadness, love, and memory. The millionaire stood behind him, silent but deeply moved. His eyes glistened with emotion he didn't try to hide. When the melody ended, the silence was full of meaning. The millionaire's voice trembled slightly. Thank you. I needed this more than you know. He exhaled softly, as if letting go of something heavy. And now, there's something else I need to tell you. Something important. The employee turned to him slowly, heart steady but curious. Something that will change everything, the millionaire added. And with those words, Part 4 came to a close, leaving the house quiet but filled with a lingering tension that promised much more to come. The room remained quiet after the melody faded into the air. The old house seemed to breathe along with them, as if even the walls had been waiting for that sound to return after so many years. The employee slowly lifted his hands from the piano keys, his fingers still tingling from the notes he had just played. When he turned around, he saw the millionaire standing perfectly still, his gaze soft but filled with emotion he had been holding back for too long. The millionaire took a slow breath before speaking. There's something I haven't told you, he said quietly. And if I'm being honest, I didn't plan to say it today. But hearing that melody again, it opened something I thought I had closed forever. The employee said nothing, giving him space to continue. The millionaire walked toward a shelf on the wall. His movements were gentle, almost cautious, like he was afraid of breaking something fragile. He picked up a small wooden box, brushed the dust from the lid, and held it in both hands. His eyes lingered on it for a long moment. This was my father's, he said. He kept his most important memories in here. Photos, letters, things he wanted to protect. He opened the box slowly. Inside were several old photographs, a few folded papers, and a worn-out piece of fabric that looked like it came from a musician's cloth case. He lifted one of the photos and handed it to the employee. This is him. The millionaire said softly dot in the picture. A warm-looking man sat at the very same piano in the room. His smile was honest and peaceful. The employee studied the photo, then glanced at the piano behind him. The resemblance between father and son was unmistakable. He taught me everything I know about music, the millionaire said. But when he passed, I shut down. Completely. I couldn't play anymore. Couldn't listen. Couldn't even look at this piano without feeling like the world had lost its color. He paused, swallowing the emotions gathering in his throat. When you played that melody at the lounge, he continued, it felt like someone reached into a place inside me that I thought had died. The employee gently placed the photo back into the box. I didn't know, he said softly. I was just playing from feeling. The millionaire nodded. That's the strange part. You played it exactly how he used to. Every pause, every breath between notes, like you were listening to something only the heart could hear. He took another slow breath. There's more. Something even stranger. He reached into the box again and took out a folded sheet of paper. This, he said, is the original sheet music of the melody you played. My father wrote it. He never published it. He only played it here, in this house. The employee frowned. Then how? That's the question, the millionaire whispered. How did you know it? How did you play it exactly as he did? The employee sat back, confused but calm. I don't know it, he said honestly. I've never seen it before. I didn't even know it was a real composition. When you asked me to play, I just followed whatever came to my mind. The millionaire stared at him, searching for any sign of uncertainty, but the employee's honesty was clear. Music has a strange way of connecting people, the employee added softly. Maybe it was just instinct. Maybe the feeling in the room brought it out. The millionaire closed the box slowly. His hands were steady, but his mind was clearly racing. I don't believe it was just instinct, he said. I think there's something deeper. Something that ties you to this melody in a way, even you don't understand yet. He walked across the room and sat down on the old sofa. The employee joined him, leaving a respectful distance. The air felt thick with curiosity. When I left the lounge last night, the millionaire said, I wasn't running away from you. I was running from the past. I didn't want to feel all of that again. But today, I think I needed to. The employee listened closely, feeling the weight of the trust the millionaire was placing on him. There's something else, the millionaire added. Something my father said to me once. He looked at the wall as though seeing a memory play out. He told me that the melody was written for someone he hadn't met yet. Someone he believed would come into my life one day and change everything. The employee blinked slowly, unsure how to respond. But how could he know that? The millionaire shook his head lightly. I don't know. My father was a dreamer. He believed in feeling more than logic. He always said music traveled through people, and sometimes it chose the right person at the right time. Silence settled between them again, gentle rather than heavy. I'm not saying this to make things strange between us, the millionaire continued. I'm saying it because last night, when you played that melody, something inside me felt right for the first time in years. He took a slow breath, like the world clicked back into place. The employee felt a warmth grow in his chest. He didn't know what to say. He didn't want to say the wrong thing. What do you want from me? He asked softly. The millionaire looked at him, truly looked at him, with sincerity that wasn't forced or dramatic. I want to understand why you could play a melody you've never heard, he said. I want to know why you walked into my life on the exact night I needed that sound again. And he paused, gathering his courage. I want to know if you're willing to let me get to know you. Not because of the challenge I made, not because of the shock of last night, but because something in this feels important, real. The employee took in his words slowly. He wasn't someone used to attention like this. He never expected a man like this, a millionaire with a hidden past and a heart full of memories open up to him this way. But he could feel something too. Something subtle but undeniable. "I don't understand any of this yet," the employee said gently. "But I'm willing to see where it goes." The millionaire's shoulders relaxed slightly, as though he had been holding his breath. "Good," he said softly, "because there's something I want to show you. Something my father left behind. I think it might help us understand this connection." He stood and nodded toward the hallway. The employee followed him through the house. They reached a small room near the back. The millionaire opened the door, and the smell of old paper and wood filled the air. Inside were shelves full of notebooks, sheet music, journals, and boxes. The employee's eyes widened. "This is all your father's?" "Yes," the millionaire replied. He wrote down everything. His thoughts, his dreams, his ideas about music and life. He picked up one particular notebook. "But this one, this is—" The journey back to town was quiet, filled with the weight of the discovery they had just made. The chest was now safely in their hands, but it felt as though it contained more than just objects and letters. It held the essence of a long-forgotten story, a story that had been waiting to be uncovered for decades. The group walked in a slow procession, their steps almost synchronized, as if they were all aware that this moment would change everything. The town of Briar Hill seemed unchanged as they made their way back through the streets. The old buildings, the quiet homes, and the familiar faces all looked the same as they had before the mystery began. But for those who had uncovered the secret of the piano, everything felt different. The weight of the past hung in the air, and the knowledge they carried with them now felt like a thread that connected the present with a forgotten time. When they returned to the hall, they carefully set the chest down in the center of the room. The piano sat in the corner, looking as unassuming as ever, but it was no longer just an old instrument. It was part of a bigger story, and now everyone in the town would know it. As the group gathered around the chest, the historian felt a wave of emotion. She had always been drawn to the past, to the stories that people had left behind, but this was different. This wasn't just an old document or an artifact, it was a piece of the town's soul. The piano, the letters, and the photograph were all part of a deeper connection, a bond that had been lost, but now had been found again. Someone in the group spoke first. "We need to share this with the town. Everyone needs to know what we've uncovered." There was a moment of hesitation, as if everyone was thinking the same thing. This was a story that belonged to the whole town, not just the small group who had stumbled upon it. But sharing it also meant revealing something that might change how people saw their town, how they saw themselves. "Do you think they'll understand?" someone asked. "I don't know," the historian replied. "But this is part of our history. It's something that has been hidden for too long." And with that, they made the decision. It was time to tell the story. The group spent the next few days preparing. They wanted to make sure the story was told right. The chest, the letters, and the photograph would be displayed in the town hall for everyone to see. They would invite everyone, families, elders, even the children, to come and learn about the forgotten history that had been buried under layers of time. The piano would remain in its corner, now a symbol of connection between past and present. As the evening approached, the townspeople began to gather. The hall filled with murmurs of curiosity. Some had heard whispers about what had been found, but most of them had no idea what the group was about to reveal. The historian, standing at the front of the room, looked out at the faces in the crowd. She felt a nervousness rise in her chest, but also a sense of pride. This was something important. This was the moment when the story would finally be told. She cleared her throat and began. It started with the discovery of an old piano, she said, her voice steady. An instrument that had been sitting forgotten in the town hall for years. But when we opened it, we found something much more than we expected. Inside, we found a map and a letter that spoke of something much bigger, something tied to the very heart of our town. She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. The room was silent, everyone listening intently. We followed the map, and it led us to a place in the hills. There we uncovered a chest. Inside, we found letters, objects, and a photograph that told a story. The story of a family who lived here many years ago, a family whose music had brought people together, and who had hidden something important, something that belonged to everyone in this town. The historian then explained everything they had, discovered the mysterious family, the piano, and the significance of the symbol they had seen everywhere. She spoke of the photograph, the woman and the man who had been part of the family, and how they had left behind a legacy that had been passed down through generations. The townspeople listened in stunned silence. It was a story unlike any they had ever heard before, a story that connected them to a past they had no idea existed. There were whispers, nods of recognition, and a few tears in the crowd. The historian's words had opened a door to something they had never fully understood. "We don't know everything," she said as she finished her story. "But what we do know is that the piano, the music, and the family were all part of something bigger. They were trying to create a bond, something that would help people understand where they came from. And now it's our turn to carry that legacy forward." The room was still for a moment, as if everyone was absorbing what they had just heard. Then, someone in the back of the room stood up. It was an elderly man, one of the town's oldest residents. "I remember," he said, his voice shaky but filled with conviction. "I remember the piano. I remember the music." The room fell silent again as the man spoke. He told the crowd about the days when the piano had been played regularly in the town hall, how the music had brought people together. He remembered the family who had once lived here, the family who had been so kind and so full of life. He talked about the piano as if it were a part of his own memories. "I was just a boy back then," he continued, "but I remember the way it felt when the music filled the room. It was like everything was right in the world. And then, one day, they were gone. Nobody ever knew what happened to them. But I always wondered." He trailed off, his voice heavy with the weight of years. The historian stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You weren't the only one," she said softly. "None of us knew. But now we do." The man nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. I'm glad that the story is finally being told." The crowd was quiet for a moment, each person processing the story in their own way. The historian looked out at the faces in the crowd, and for the first time, she felt a deep connection to them. The mystery that had been buried for so long was no longer just a secret. It was part of their shared history. And then, someone in the back raised their hand. "What happens now?" they asked. The historian smiled, knowing that the answer was simple. "Now," she said, "we carry the legacy forward. The music, the story, the bond that was created all those years ago. We honor it by remembering and by sharing it with the next generation." As the crowd began to disperse, there was a sense of peace in the air. The mystery had been solved, but it wasn't just the answers that mattered. It was the way the town had come together to uncover the truth. The piano, once forgotten, had now become a symbol of connection, of history, and of the power of music to bring people together. The historian stood in the center of the hall, looking around at the faces of the townspeople. She felt a sense of pride that she had never known before. This wasn't just her story, or the story of the group who had uncovered the mystery. It was the town's story, a story that had been waiting to be told. And with that, the forgotten grand piano, once hidden in the shadows, had finally revealed its secrets. The town of Briar Hill would never be the same again. The mystery had ended, but the legacy would live on forever.